Um, so as part of it, that's something that I always ask everyone whenever you guys are working with your dogs and everything that we're doing. Make sure that you're passionate about it and that you're giving your best, because the dogs that we select and that we use to do this work, they always give their best. They're always giving everything they have. So I always recommend that everyone, what we're going to be doing, every work, anything, no matter what it is, always give it your 100%. So this presentation is going to be about Bitework development, and it's going to be obviously put into an hour and a half worth of information, hopefully. And it's a lot of information to compress into just that short amount of time. But I'll do my best with this presentation to try to cover as much information as possible with the time that we have allotted for this. So the important part of Bitework development is understanding the learning mechanisms that the dogs use, right? And so that's why for my methods, I like to call it the dogs learning by association and the dogs learning by consequence. So, and that's a lot, obviously, all of it based from classical conditioning and operant conditioning theories. So everything that we're going to be doing is going to be based on that. A note before I start, and it's something very important to understand, not just from my work, but from any other trainer's work that you guys might be listening to or learning from, is that this way of me doing things is not the way, it's not the only and one magical way of doing things, is one of the ways that things work, and is a way that works for me. So it's very important for me to explain the why of why I'm doing, to make sure for those of you that are learning and listening these methods for the first time, you understand why we're doing it and not just going out and replicating what you're seeing, right? It's something that we want to make sure that we know the why we're doing and understand how it's happening, so you guys can then replicate it and make it work in a way that works for you. So you're not going to be able to replicate everything exactly the way I do it. So try to find and understand the why I'm doing it, so then you can replicate that and make it work for you, okay? All right, so let's get started. So for a little bit more about me personally, I was born in the island of Puerto Rico in the Caribbean, and I was raised in the city of Cowers. And where I started with my exposure to animal behavior. I started with training horses and working with horses in the horse farm that my family had. And it's really where I started working with behavior and training and really developing the passion for all things, animal related and also behavior related. There, I also started working as a veterinary technician. So it was something that gave me a good rounded understanding of animals altogether, because it wasn't just the behavior aspect. I also started paying a little bit more attention to the medical side of things, and that everything intertwines together when it comes to dog training. After graduating from high school, I moved to the United States with a scholarship to the Ohio State University. I played professional volleyball there. And that's something that I also grew up as a kid playing professional volleyball, and I got the opportunity to travel all over the world and play volleyball for the Puerto Rico national team. After graduating, after being at Ohio State for a while, I didn't like it. It wasn't for me. So I was looking for something else that I wanted to do and something I was passionate about. And that's when dog training came around, and I decided to go to a dog training school. That's where I got all the theory and the basics of what I know, but it really didn't give me much of anything other than that, because when I graduated, I had to start from scratch and just start apprenticing other people. So after I had the opportunity to apprentice under several big names like Mike Ritland and Wayne Dodge, that opened a lot of doors for me, and I had the opportunity to go work in different companies and also be able to manage and train dogs for multiple contracts, including like military contracts and government contracts like TSA, Border Patrol, the National Security Agency, and the Department of Defense. What I like the most is obviously aggression training, and aggression training towards a real life application. While I do appreciate sports, and I think it's a great thing for people to do, and I always recommend everyone to learn as much as possible, I have followed more on the law enforcement and personal protection side, just because it makes more sense to me where the application is more realistic and it's something that we can put into practice in real life. So that's why I kind of choose that. But other than Bitework, I'm also extremely passionate about tracking. And it's something that I always say, if you can find them, you can buy them. So before we find the person, we got to track them. And that's why I'm also very passionate about that. But enough about me, and let's move on to the dog training. So a very couple important things about Bitework development is that as a handler or as a dog trainer, as a dog owner, you have to be your dog's advocate, right? So it's something that I always try to tell all my clients and all my friends that have dogs, you have to be your dog's advocate. If there's something that a trainer or a decoy or anyone is doing that one, you don't understand, or you don't, it seems like it's not correct, say something. You know, you gotta speak up. Unfortunately, your dog is not gonna be able to tell you like, hey, this is wrong. So you need to be able to read your dog and to understand whatever this person is doing is really not working out. I need to find something else or a different way to do it because this is something's wrong. But you have to be able to speak up and be your dog's advocate. I see a lot of people that they told me, I knew that was wrong. That person is a famous trainer and I thought they knew what they were talking about. It doesn't matter who it is, how famous they are, or how much they know. If it's something you think it's wrong and they can't explain why they're doing it, just stop and just put your dog in your car and drive away. It just doesn't matter who it is. Einstein himself said, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it yourself. So everybody should be more than capable to explain what they're doing and why they're doing it. All right, so when we're starting with from the beginning, one of the most important parts is that the dog must be having fun. If the dog is not enjoying what they're doing, it's like forcing a little kid into going into a personal defense class. It's not fun. They don't want to be there. And they're probably not going to learn much because the entire time they're more worried about not getting hurt than they're worried about how much they're going to learn and how much fun they're going to be having. For the dog to be in the proper mindset of learning, for the dog to feel comfortable enough to be able to go out there, have fun, and learn something, the dog needs to feel comfortable with the environment and also with the trainer. That's why it's very incorrect to have the train of thought that the decoy is the bad guy. The decoy is not the bad guy at all. The decoy is the sparring coach. The decoy is the good guy that's teaching me how to handle pressure and how to handle different things that I might not like. But it's all done in an environment where the dog is confident and they know they're not gonna be harmed. If the dog is in the mentality that they might get harmed or hurt in any way during the training, they're gonna be more worried about being safe than they're gonna be about learning and exploring new things. We want the dogs to be able to self-discover behaviors and for them to feel confident that they can try new things without nothing bad happening to them. If the consequence of them trying something new is for that thing to backfire, then they're not going to try it again. And on top of that, they're not going to feel as comfortable to try new things. So that's why we have to make sure the dog is in the proper mindset to start learning. A lot of times, there's the unfortunate reality that there's not that many skilled decoys. So it's hard to find somebody that knows how to work your dog properly or that knows how to develop dogs. And I always like to say that if you don't have the right work, it's better to not do it. It's better to do less than just do something that is not going to be productive to what your ultimate goal is. So if you know that somebody's not as good, but hey, they're the only person that's close enough, so why not? It's better to do less work than to do it wrong. When you have the dog that has the proper genetics, it's better to allow those genetics to mature and do their thing than try to put some negative work that is not going to help. That's not going to help your ultimate goal. All right, so let's get started with the basics and the how we do all the training. So one of the most important things is that everything that we're doing, you have to train with a purpose. We have to have a reason why we're doing it and also have a plan of where we're going. If you don't have a training goal, then you're not training for anything. You're training for nothing. You need to understand, for example, when we're starting with young puppies, we want to first make them comfortable, make them confident, and to teach the basic behaviors of regripping, holding with a deep bite with good pressure. So number one thing always is to make those things, make the dog feel confident, make sure that we understand what we're gonna be working with, and then stick to that plan, okay? So every time before we start training, I like to create a training plan. This is something that we have multiple different plans as well. So we have a training plan for the one session we're doing today. We have a training plan for the week, a training plan for the month, and an overall training plan for the dogs, first 2 years of their life where they're gonna be receiving all their training. So it's something that is very important to have that roadmap of what we're gonna be working with, because that way you have an idea where you're gonna have to stay with and continue your training, instead of just going out there and winging it and hope that everything works the way it should. And every dog is different, so you have to make sure that you set your training plan for that individual goal. Every dog is different and they all reach milestones at different times. There's some puppies like Malinois and Dutch Shepherds that mature way faster than other normal working dogs like German Shepherds. But even within the German Shepherds, there's some dogs that mature really early, like a Malinois, and some other ones that mature way later. So you have to create that training plan for that specific dog that you're going to be working. And the other part is to stick to your plan. That's something that's even difficult for me. I have a terrible ADD. So sticking to your plan, what you're working on, is very important to make sure that everything that's going to plan. Now, a side note on that, of course, we have to be flexible. And if we see something that needs addressing, then we'll change the plan. But for the majority of the time, just it's good to stick to the plan. So when we're working with the dogs and developing the bite, for me, for my purposes, I'm always looking for the dogs to have the goal of have a calm, crushing bite that is also pushing forward. I'm not a big fan of dogs that pull on the bite, even though I know in some circles, like the Chiton or IPO, IGP people, they encourage the pulling on the bite and they like that. But the reason why I don't, and the reason I don't promote it on my dogs, is because a pulling bite, it increases the chances of the dog creating bigger lacerations or bigger cuts and bigger wounds on the subject. And for, like I said, a lot of the work we do is for law enforcement. And of course, we want to minimize the amount of trauma that we're causing on the suspect. We just want to make sure that the dog creates enough pain compliance for the person to give up and do what we're asking. So when you have a dog that pulls on the bite, it can create bigger wounds and bigger cuts that we're not looking for. And then also, if the dog gets the improper bite and they start pulling, for example, if they just buy a shirt or just a piece of equipment and they start pulling, they might rip off and come off the bite. And obviously that's undesirable as well. For that reason, I always like to teach my dogs to push and bite deeper and calmer. That allows the dog to give the person, to create the pain compliance that we're looking for by having a solid crushing grip, while at the same time creating the least amount of damage to the person physically. This dog that you guys are going to see here is a very popular dog. His name is Norton. He has fathered a lot of police dogs. So his genetics are 100% there. And on top of that, he passes them along to his offsprings. So the reason I put him here is because for me, this dog has the perfect bite where he bites in the one spot where he knows it's effective, and then just keeps regripping and pushing in and crushing, doing more and more, regardless of what the decoy is doing. So the dog is coming in there with its own plan and he's making it happen. So if you guys pay attention to the bite, you will see about what I'm talking about with the calm and the crushing bite. You see, independent of what I'm doing, no matter what's happening, the dog just keeps walking forward and biting and regripping. No matter what I do, if I touch him underneath his stomach, same answer, nothing changes. You see, no matter what's happening, the dog is just biting and creating more and more pressure. For me, that's the ideal bite and what I'm always striving for all my dogs to be able to accomplish, that calm, crushing bite. So a very important note before we continue is to understand that the dog individually decides what he or she perceives as a reinforcement or a punishment, right? And for these purposes, I like to use reinforcement and punishment with the definitions described from operant conditioning. So reinforcement is something that is going to increase the likelihood of a behavior from happening again, and punishment is going to decrease the likelihood of the behavior from happening again. So again, reinforcement is increasing, punishment is decreasing the likelihood. So the dog will decide that. What I mean by that is some dogs, when they regrip and they crush down on the bite in your arm and you scream in pain, they see that scream as a positive thing. Some dogs hear you screaming and they will start wagging their tails. They like it and they get empowered by it. So they were more likely to try that regrip and that crushing bite again because it worked. They enjoyed it. But to some other dogs, that exact same scream that when you scream because you're in pain, that might be perceived as a punishment. They might not like it. They don't like the loud noise coming from the decoy. So what you were trying to reward the dog with a screaming pain, the dog perceives it as a punishment, and they're less likely to do a crushing bite again. Because basically they're thinking, if I bite hard, if I bite deep, this guy's gonna scream, and I don't like when he screams, right? So you have to pay attention to what the individual dog you're working with, what they perceive as a reward or as punishment. The other important part is the dog needs to understand that they control the stimulus, whatever it is. So for example, if I flank a dog and I pinch their skin, they need to understand that they can make it stop. It's not only holding on until I let go. They need to be proactive to making me let go. Whenever we teach the dogs that if they're proactive, if they are in control of the negative things, then they get emboldened, they get more bold with that, because they know if something bad happens to me, I can do something to stop it. And that's no different than personal protection training or mixed martial arts, self-defense training for people and adults. The reason that self-defense training makes people feel more confident is because they lose the uncertainty of, if I get attacked, I don't know what to do. When you get training, then you do know what to do. So you feel more confident that if something happens, you know what to do about it. That's exactly the same mentality we want our animals and our dogs to have, that they feel empowered by the thought that if this guy does something that I don't like, I can make it stop. I control that. And obviously, they will always have the ultimate goal to teach the dogs that fighting harder make the negative things go away. Anything that you don't like, it goes away if you fight and bite harder. And if you don't fight hard enough, or if you don't bite hard enough, the negative things that you don't like, they're going to increase and get worse progressively. Once we combine all these things, you get a dog that's empowered by their decisions and they're ready to come do what they're trained to do. All right, and we'll start. This is obviously very common knowledge nowadays, the classical conditioning and theories and the operant conditioning, but I always like to review them so we can use the proper terminology throughout the presentation, and also you guys see where I'm coming from with them. So classical conditioning was noticed by Russian scientist Ivan Pavlov, as we all know, and he was conducting a series of testing about stomach ulcers, and he realized that the dogs started salivating when they heard the food hitting the bowls. So that's when he started realizing, wait a minute, the noise of metal, or clinking metal, shouldn't trigger any type of response on a dog, because metal means absolutely nothing to a dog. The sight of food does trigger salivation on a dog, because that is a primary reward, is something the dog needs to exist, and is something that is preloaded into their brain from when they're born. That food is good. Nobody needs to teach that to a dog. Every dog knows that from birth. But the part that they didn't know is that metal equals food, right? That they did not know that part. So Pavlov discovered that with enough repetition, he was able to pair the noise of metal, or any stimulus for that matter, to something that they already know, like the sight of food. And the important part to understand about classical conditioning is the part where it's involuntary. We're looking for involuntary behaviors. So for example, when Pavlov was using the food and the food was hitting the metal bowl, the act of salivating is involuntary to the dogs. They cannot control that. So we're trying to trigger involuntary responses in the dogs by a classically conditioned stimulus. So for me, the number one thing to always take away from classical conditioning is that it's involuntary. So here we have the very basic graphic explaining this. Of course, food is an unconditioned stimulus, and nobody has to condition it because it's preloaded into the dog's brain, and it has the response where it creates a salivation. Once again, it's an unconditioned response. The dog doesn't need to think about it. It just happens. No different than us. We can salivate only until we see something that triggers that response to us. So before conditioning, the whistle or whatever sound of metal was created had absolutely no response to the dog, because the whistle is not conditioned in any way to the dog, and it means nothing to a dog. But after enough repetitions of pairing the whistle with the food, then we start getting the conditioned response where the dog starts salivating for the noise, just like if it was for the food. Now, the second part is operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is best described as learning by consequence. When the dog does something, what is the action that follows it? So, and of course, in operant conditioning, we have the 4 quadrants of positive reinforcement, positive punishment, negative reinforcement, and negative punishment. And that's something that everybody sees this completely different. And there's a lot of arguing in the canine industry when it comes to these training theories, but we use them to try to find a common ground in the terminology that we're going to be using. So here in this graphic, we can see the 4 quadrants of the operant conditioning. And we got to look at positive and negative as the way that it works in math. We can't look at it from good or bad, how the dog, no. It all means adding or subtracting. So when they say positive reinforcement, that means adding something that will increase the frequency of the desirable behavior. So you're adding something like in math. And when we say negative reinforcement, is something that we're taking away that will increase the frequency of the desirable behavior. So when we start seeing positive and negative, always think math. Positive is adding something, negative is taking something away. And we already talked about this, but reinforcement is something that increases the desired behavior, and punishment something that decreases the frequency of the desired behavior. So when we put them all together, we got positive punishment, positive reinforcement, negative punishment, and negative reinforcement. And one that we use every day, and sometimes we don't even notice, is negative reinforcement, where we get in our vehicles every morning to go to work, and sometimes we're so busy that we forget to put our seatbelt on. And what happens nowadays? We get that annoying ding. It starts ding, 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 and it just continues. And my wife has a newer car, and her car even escalates it now. So if you don't put on the seatbelt fast enough, then it starts getting louder and faster and very, very, very annoying. So what happens when you had enough of it and you go ahead and you click your seatbelt on, you get rewarded by removing that negative noise that you hate so much. And it's so effective that now the amount of people that wear the seatbelt has increased a tremendous amount in the world. And it has nothing to do with the death and the people who are dying in the crashes. It has to do with the annoying ding, the annoying noise that's making them do it. So it's a very, very strong quadrant. And it's a quadrant that we use a lot in Bitework. And a way that you can picture it, that we use it in the Bitework development, is anytime that the dog does something and we take away the negative stimulus. So for example, if we're pinching the dog's skin and we're flanking a dog and the dog regrips, I let go of their skin. So I remove that negative stimulus that they're feeling to reward the bite. So that's very important to keep in mind. All right, and then we move on to the Skinner box. The Skinner box is something that was also discovered by sorry about that. Skinner box is something that's part of the operant conditioning quadrants, and it's something that is used in dog training immensely. Something that we use all the time, whether that'll be for pet training, detection training for everything. And a Skinner box, basically the best way to describe it, or for my application, the way I like to describe it is something that we can use to isolate the desired behaviors. So something that we're looking to isolate a regrip, stopping a dog from pulling on the bite, anything specific that we want to isolate that one behavior, that's when we apply a Skinner box. And for us in Bitework development, the Skinner box comes in multiple ways. That can be a bite table, the ones that we use to put the dogs elevated on the ground, whether it will be a round one or the box type of Bitework tables. The bungee cords that put a lot of back pressure on the dog so they can't do anything other than bite. If they open their mouth, they will come off the bite. So that by itself isolates the behaviors because they can do nothing else but to hold on. And we can even expand that to using walls or even the handler's legs. I've used that in the past. If you think of a dog that's biting you in the forearm and the dog is trying to fan away from you, they're moving in a circular way, trying to get away from you. If you get close to a wall, you can use that wall to keep the dog from running away from you, and then you can isolate the behavior and channel the dog into pushing instead of trying to sway away from you. So here's the picture of the original Skinner box where they conducted the operant condition experiments where the rat, a light and a sound will come up and the rat had to press specific buttons and then the food will be dispensed. Another one that is very important that we use all the time is the resistance to coercion or opposition reflex. The best way to describe it is to have that instinctual reaction to push against the pull. So we all know that when your dog is trying to go forward, if you pull back, that only makes them to want to go forward even more. And that's something that's very powerful in Bitework because it's an involuntary and consistent behavior. It's something that we know it's going to happen every single time. And if you look up opposition reflex or anywhere, Google it, it's really a term that's only been used by dog training, I believe. And the only area where I could really find any mention of it was in the old Pavlov research, where he referred to it as the freedom reflex. Basically, the dogs wanted to do the opposite of what they were being asked to do. But that's very important to us because when you have a dog that is pulling away, we can use the opposition reflex to coerce them into doing something that we want, right? So if they're pulling, we can pull against them and then that will create the push. Okay, a very important thing to understand is that every dog has their own individual genetic potential. Doesn't matter how much training you do, how good of a trainer, the genetic potential of every dog is given to them by their biological parents, and there's nothing else we can do about it. Every dog has a different genetic potential. So our goal as dog trainers is trying to maximize the genetic potential of every dog. So for example, some dogs can tolerate a lot more pain than others. So our job is to dog trainers being able to maximize how much that dog can handle and make sure that we get the most out of their genetic potential. And all limits when it comes to pain, bite pressure, all of the limits that a dog has, they're all set by genetics. There's nothing else we can do. Our job, like I said, as trainers, is just to maximize that, to get the most out of each dog. Okay, so I like to divide the training phases into three. That's pre-teething, post-teething, and then adult work or advanced work. That's something that's very important for you guys to understand which phase the dog is going at. So make sure that we do the proper work. There's no need whatsoever to try to rush a dog through all the phases. There's a lot of time that I see 12-week-old puppies hanging off of a bite suit. And something very important to keep in mind is that just because the dog can doesn't mean the dog should. We're getting better and better dogs genetically, that they're getting better and better younger, right? They're stronger and stronger every time. The problem with that is that you get these puppies that they show that they want to do a lot and they actually do a lot, but that doesn't mean that just because they can, that they should be doing it. Sometimes their drives push them to do a lot of things that their brain is not mature enough to deal with yet. For example, a puppy would love to go in and bite a lot of things, but they don't want to deal with the psychological pressure of something. And there's something called single event learning, that something can be impactful enough to your dog that one negative experience or positive, but in this case, if you have one negative experience at a young age, you can create a problem that is never, you're never going to be able to recover from, because it was so impactful that the dog will remember it forever. So it's something to be important to keep the dog at their pace and just keep them in their phase that they should be at. During the pre-teething phase, our goals are to establish a baseline. So basically, I want to know what this individual puppy is working with. Every single dog is different. So we gotta make sure that we establish our baseline for every single dog. The second thing is that we want to create a positive association to bite work. I want to have these puppies, we start them right at 7 or 8 weeks. And we want to make sure that every time they see the bite work equipment or they go to the bite work area, they're dying to go in. It's their favorite thing. They go in there, they know good things happen. They get to play and do their favorite activity. And that way we create a positive association in their brain that they're saying, anytime I come in here or anytime I go do this type of work, it's really good. It's something that works for me perfectly. And then also at this young age, you want to enhance any positive genetic traits that the dogs naturally have. For example, some dogs are very possessive as a puppy, and that's something that we can try to enhance it as early as possible to teach them that that's a good, successful behavior that they should continue doing throughout their career. This is a very good puppy here from a litter of dogs that I think they're about closer to 2 years old now. So this is a little bit older video. And this dog, it's a very good puppy that I like a lot. So that's why you might see him in a couple different videos. But this dog here, he is very good at understanding what we're trying to do. And something that I want you guys to focus on this video is how we try to let the dog bring the decoy alive. That's something that we do that's quite different than most people in bite work. And it is that we teach the dog that he needs to bark. They need to do something for me to start moving and me come around. I don't like to go out in a field and start cracking a lot of whips and making a lot of noise and trying the dogs to come alive. I like the dogs to bring that out of me. I want the dog to see me and know that if I bark enough, this guy is gonna start moving and become my decoy. If we start doing the opposite, if you start doing cracking the whip, making a lot of noise and having to do a lot of things for the dog to come alive, then the dogs will become dependent on that. And they're gonna always be looking for, where's the guy that's gonna come out here and dance for me? We want to have the opposite. We want to have the dogs that are proactive and that they're barking and understanding that if I bark enough at this guy, he will become my decoy. So whenever you guys are watching this video, pay attention to the training rag that I'm using. I let it go dead. I let it go completely flat. And once the puppy comes alive, then I start moving it. So as you guys can see, once the dog shows the proper behavior, I like to let the owner put a little resistance while the puppy is trying to pull into the bite. And once they show enough energy that they want to come to it, we release the pressure on the leash, creating an effect of a slingshot. And that way the puppy is able to just go ahead and launch forward into the bite. So I'm gonna replay that one more time so you guys can see it. The puppy drags, and at the end, he gets slingshotted into the bite. That creates the dogs that understand that they need to do that effort at the very end before they get their bite. It needs to be an explosive motion, launching forward and trying to get it themselves. We're not gonna give it to them. After the dog obviously has the proper bite, I like to readjust their grip. So the second the puppy regrips and gets a deeper bite, I let go completely to mark the behavior. So whenever the puppy regrips, I let go and I teach them whenever you bite deeper, you get to keep the toys. So I'm also trying to desensitize the puppy to me touching them to know that every time I come over, I'm not gonna take anything from them. They get to keep their toy. And all we're trying to work is in just rewarding that full calm grip. So you see when the puppy gets to hold it, life is good, they're wagging their tail. I create a little noise, a little distraction just to show them no matter what stimulus is happening, it's okay. If their bite is not that great, I fix it by making the rag go completely flat. And once the puppy regrips, then I move. Until then, nothing happens. So you see, I'm just holding the rag straight. And once the puppy regrips it once, then I'll let go of it and go to the end of the leash. There we go. The dog regrip. So now I go back to the end and make the rag come alive again. All we're trying to create throughout the process is the idea that the puppy is active and I just react to what they're doing. If they want me to let go of that rig, of the little rag, they just have to bite deeper and I'll let go of it. See, I'm holding it straight. When the puppy regrips, I back away from it and I let them take it. I'm just holding it completely straight and I'm letting the puppy do more. I'm not gonna try to shove the rag deeper into their mouth. I actually try to pull it away from them and then I wait for them to regrip. Once they regrip, my hands fly off of it to mark the behavior of regripping. I want him to understand if I bite deeper, my hand flies away immediately. You see, everything I'm doing is petting and fun for the puppy, so I want to make sure he has a good association with me. Make sure that he's having a lot of fun the entire time. Here we're gonna see another puppy from the exact same litter, and it's the same work. The dog, this puppy right here, is very possessive, way more than the other one. So that's one of the characteristics that are genetic that we're gonna try to enhance during this session as well. So the puppy needs to bark to make the rag come alive. See, once the puppy barks, then the rag moves. Then we let the puppy drag forward. See, the puppy sees my barking is making it come alive, so they start doing it more and more and more. Now they start dragging forward. And once the puppy is giving a lot of efforts, they're really frustrated, then we let her go and make sure that they launch forward into the bite. As soon as they do that, we go back to the back pressure and trying to get the puppy to regrip. Like I said, this puppy genetically, she is very possessive and doesn't like to open her mouth. So naturally, she's gonna take a little bit longer to open her mouth and discover that regripping makes my hands go away. So it's all working with what the dog, individual dog, is giving you genetically. So as you see, the puppy's pulling, that it all has to do with how possessive that puppy is. They don't want to open their mouth. All they want is for me to let go of it. I'm gonna allow the pulling behavior to fail. So I'm gonna do absolutely nothing. And then when the puppy regrips, I then let go of it. While the puppy is pulling, you can't do nothing. I want the behavior to be not productive at all. I just want the puppy to fail at pulling. And once the puppy fails, then they will try something else. And that something else always turns out to be regripping. As you can see here, this puppy, like I said, is very possessive. So the second they get a good grip, they just clamp down and hold on to it. That's a characteristic that I really, really like. So I'm trying to enhance it by trying to keep the puppy on that mindset of possessiveness as long as possible. So you see, I keep touching between her ears and trying to hit the points that triggers the dog to possess their equipment. Putting your hands underneath their jaws and putting your hands behind their ears, that teaches and triggers the dog to want to hold on deeper to the rag. You see, all I'm trying to do is extend the amount of time that the dog is in that mindset. I want them to be thinking like that. I want to hold on to this. I want to possess this as long as possible. See, no matter what I'm doing, the puppy knows my job is to just hold on to this. And I start adding a couple different stimulus to see if anything changes, just trying to establish my baseline for this puppy and trying to see what is it that they like and what they don't like. And as long as I can keep the puppy on that mindset of just holding on is good, that's all I want to do. Once again, this is a genetic trait. There's some dogs who will never do this. They will never be able to be this possessive because genetically they're not that way. So make sure that you're judging the dogs for the individual genetic characteristics. You notice there, she snapped out of it. She came out of the possessiveness stage. So now we start working back on the regrips and the petting and back to the same behaviors. See, she loves bringing the toy to me. She really enjoys playing with me, which is a very good trait because in the future, she's gonna have to play with it. Another good thing to learn from this, if the puppy lets go of the bite, for whatever reason, they're not gonna get it again. They get put up. So there, if you notice, the puppy lost it. And after the puppy lost it, we don't give her the bite again. She gets dragged all the way out to the car and gets put up. So for, I don't know why, but the puppy let go, and they're gonna learn what happens when they let go. If they let go, then they lose it. See, like there, she lets go, and then that's it. I tease her, and she gets dragged all the way out to the car. A lot of people like to be of the mentality that if the dog if the dog fails, then we have to help them and try to get them to do it again so they can do it right. And I am not at all of that mentality. I always like to think if the puppy fails, then the failure will teach them that there's no better teacher than failure. So if the dog lets go, we put them up. We don't give them a second chance. I like to put them up, let them think about what happened, why they lost it for about 3 to 5 minutes, and then bring them back out and try it again, okay? So always keep that in mind. If the dog lets go, no second chances. The biggest learning comes from failure, okay? Here is one of the puppies was being raised by our partners at Grassroots Canine and Michael Nesbeth. We do a lot of work with them. On top of being one of my best friend, my best friend, he's also an amazing trainer. So a lot of his work is top notch. Here in this video, you're gonna see how we start teaching a puppy to get over environmental pressures. In this instance, they're trying to teach the puppy to get through a can curtain. So I'm sure you guys all seen the strings with a ton of cans attached to it. This is how we start the young puppies getting used to it and any other stimulus. The point is that the dogs get introduced to it at a slow pace and in small pieces. So a little bit at a time. Here, as you can see, all the cans are completely flat on the ground. It's super easy. It's basically no visual cue to the dog. They can barely see them. They're very small on the ground. And all he has to do is just walk over them. So as you can see, it's something very simple. The puppy just has to go over the cans, nothing too crazy, just simple, making sure that they can master that. Once the puppy masters that, then we start moving up to the next stage. And now on the second part, as you can see, the cans are a little bit higher. So they're getting a little bit bigger. It's a little bit more visual effect now. The puppy gets to see it head on, and they have to deal with that pressure. It's just a little bit more than the previous one. Obviously, the puppy has great genetics. The puppy doesn't care much about it to begin with. So the puppy conquered that, no problem at all. Once we see the puppies succeed like that, that'll let us know that they're ready for the next step. So slowly, one step at a time. Once the puppy gets it right, then we move on. You see, now the can curtain is completely up. The puppy has to go through it this time, and they have to deal with the cans directly head on. See, now the puppy knows what he's doing. Going to the currents is no problem. As he already in the past, they tried that same thing at a smaller pace and they succeeded on it. Nothing bad happened. They were successful. They got to have their bite that we're looking for. So once we break it down into small successful steps, then we can teach the dogs that pressure gets handled by just going through it. If we go do too much at once, sometimes we try to do too much right at the first time, then we might set ourselves to the point that the dog might fail, and then they're gonna learn from that failure in a negative way, not in a positive way where they think like, oh no, I should have done this and I lost it. They learn from like, that was too much for me and I just don't want to deal with it at all, right? We want to make sure that we're taking it in the proper steps that the pups can handle. All right, so once the dogs reach the teething point, so around 4 months of age, we all know the puppies start losing their puppy teeth and they start moving on to the adult teeth. Everybody has a different opinions on this, but for me, I like to stop completely all the bite work when my dogs start teething, because I don't want to have any opportunities where the dogs will associate biting and putting bite pressure with pain. So if a dog is teething and they bite really hard and then one of their puppy teeth comes off and it hurts them, then they might associate that pressure and crushing down in what they're biting with pain. So to prevent that, the second I see a dog starts teething, I completely stop the bite work, or at the most, if I do let them bite something, I never talk on it. I let them bite it once quickly, and then they can take it and carry it around. So sometimes it's a lot easier to just not do anything at all. And that way you make sure that the dog doesn't get any negative associations while they're teething. Once the dog is done completely teething, usually between 5.5 months, close to 6 months of age, the dogs are completely done with their teeth, and then we can start training all over again. So once we start that teething, that post-teething work, the goals are to continue what we were doing in the previous phase. So continue the generalization to different equipment and different areas, and then also building the endurance as they start getting older. Just we gotta be careful because they're still puppies, obviously, but we start trying to do the bite sessions a little bit longer at a time. Every session a little bit longer, a little bit longer. That way we can make sure that two things happen. One, the dogs are obviously building their stamina and getting the physical requirements that they have, and also so they start satisfying their drive. These dogs have crazy drive to bite things. They really want to do it. So we have to make sure that we're satisfying those drives. A lot of problems that come out of bite work where there's handler reactivity, the dogs are super spun up and they can't think straight. A lot of that is because they have all this need for a bite. They really want to bite. They've been looking forward to it. And then the second they get to be on the decoy or in the bite pillow is only 4 or 5 minutes, and that's it, take them off. Or even 1 minute and the dog has to come off. That is just not enough time for the dog to satisfy their drives and to get the training that they need. That's why I'm a big fan of when the dogs are older to do 10, 15-minute long bite sessions and 20 minutes even when the weather permits it, because that way we can make sure that the dogs are building their stamina, but also that the dogs are are satisfying their drive, and we're not creating any kind of problem somewhere else. And one of the other things that we want to achieve during this phase is the creating cues to the regrip. So for example, I like my dogs to understand that the back pressure on the leash, when that back pressure is released, that's a cue for them to regrip and bite deeper and bite harder. Also, we can do verbal cues. So whenever we say a word, the dog understands to regrip and bite harder. For example, in law enforcement, that can be the sheriff's canine office or police department canine office, and you will see the dogs will regrip under that command. So anything we can do to create a cue for the dogs to bite harder, we try to achieve that during this stage as well. Here you will see this dog is just done teething, and we're about to move them from the little puppy equipment that they know to a higher equipment. So we just try to start bridging that gap from when they were puppies to now that they're done with the teething phase. You see the same routine applies. The dog has to bark to get me to come alive. I'm not just gonna go out there dancing for the dog. The dog has to be proactive and then get it. Once the dog drags you in, the same, we slingshot effect the dog and allow them to do the same things that they learned when they were puppies. You see there, the puppy has a frontal bite. We make sure that they regrip, and once they regrip, then we let them go back to the end of the leash. You see, they have the back pressure. I hold it straight. The loose leash indicates that they should regrip and get a deeper bite. Here's another pup, the same deal. We're introducing them to new equipment. They went from the little rag, now they're moving to a pillow. This pillow is a slippery one, so if the dog doesn't have a lot of pressure on it, I can take it from them. It's a special leather made just for that. So you cannot try to rip off the equipment just with any equipment. This is equipment that's specifically made to be able to be taken away from the dog. You see, once the dog gets the bite, I move back to the end of the line, and the release of the pressure teaches the dog that they need to regrip. So every time the handler releases the pressure, that means to regrip to the dog. See? Every time the dog goes loose, and then I move back to away from the sleeve. See, every regrip is marked, and I let him take the wedge. That way we can mark to the dog that regripping and making that effort to bite deeper and harder gets him what he wants, which is for me to let go of his pillow. See, and as you can tell, he's wagging his tail. He comes back to me. He wants to play with me. He enjoys it, and that's what we're looking for. Once again, if at any point the dog loses it, he's gonna get dragged all the way outside to the car, and we're not gonna give him a second chance. But right now, we're just trying to teach him that biting that wedge, he needs to hold on to it and bite deeper. Every time he bites deeper, I mark it, I use the word yes, and I also pet the dog and let him know that something good happened. See? Every time he regrets and bites harder, I take my hands away from it. And that's a cue for him to understand I have to hold on to it and I have to bite deeper. It's the only way for me to let go of it is for him to bite deeper onto it. See, he even bringing his toy to me. He knows that I'm not gonna take it, so he's bringing his toy to me, trying to play with me, which is what I want. Now, if, like I said, at any point he loses it, I take it from him and he doesn't get it again. Anytime we're introducing a second piece of equipment, we want to create the mentality on the dog. The only equipment that is important is the one that the decoy is holding. Anything else, like there, you see, he lost the equipment. That's it. He gets put up and he doesn't get to have it again. We tease them and we remind them why they should never let go, but they don't get the equipment again. But in this one, I'm going to replay it. It's very important. We always want to create that mentality on the dog that the equipment is not important. The only important part is what the decoy is holding. That's why, if you guys see, I let him have that one and I grab a different piece of equipment and I try to make sure that he spits that one out because the one I have is more important. That's how we can make dogs that are not equipment fixated. But once again, when he lets go of it, he loses it and that's it. Boom, that's it. He lost it, he doesn't get it back. Okay. This is the next spot. The same thing. We're trying to bridge the gap with this one. Now we're trying to teach her to get on the table. This is the first time that this dog has been on the table. She's never been on the table before. So I'm using something she knows, like that, the little wedge, the little rag that she likes, her toy. She really likes it. So we're using that to bridge the gap between the floor and the table. And once we're on the table, we're using the exact same principles. The dog needs to bite deep and hold on to the back. And I just, once they do it, I back away to the end of the line. And I mark the behavior of biting the full grip. You see there that she got a full mouth, then I can back up to the end of the line. If she regrips, but she doesn't get the full grip, that's okay. I'm not gonna do anything negative. I just don't back away from the toy to mark that it's good, but it's not good enough. You have to bite deeper. So you hold it and I wait for the dog to regrip. When the dog bites deep and hard, then they can have it. And this same theory doesn't change throughout equipment. It's the same with all the equipment, whether it's the baby rag, whether it's a slippery wedge, the pillow, sleeve, and the suit. They have to bite deeper for them to achieve their goals. See, like always, we're trying to create the positive association with the decoy. It's not a war. I'm not their enemy. I'm just the person teaching them how to get their toy back. See, once they do that, then they get to have their toy back. I'm backing away from the toy. That's enough to mark the behavior. See, I start adding a little noise, just adding different stimulus so we can start teaching the dog. That's fine. Everything's okay. A little noise that it doesn't change their bite, which is what I'm looking for. And then I reward it by petting and telling her, good, you held on to it. That's what I want. And then another regrip and I back away from it. Start trying different things, trying to set the baseline. It doesn't mind when I touch her paws. That's very good. I let her have the toy to mark the behavior. And throughout this process, we're just trying to see how and how they handle the pressure and what different things makes them uncomfortable and they don't like as much. See, that's why I'm touching everywhere, trying to see if I find anything the dog doesn't like as much, and also try to expose them to all that touch and all that tactile stimulation. It's all okay. There's nothing wrong with it. If at any point I discover something they don't like there, the noise in the door make her let go because she doesn't know what it meant. Now she gets pulled off and she doesn't get to have it again. And you can see, obviously, the puppy is very upset by losing it. And that's what I mean by having the right dog that we know it's going to be upset by this. And now we start teasing the puppy all the way out, and they don't get the bite again until they get put up all the way back into the crate, and they don't get to have it again. And if you have the puppy that's upset like that, that's exactly what we want. We want the dogs that don't want to be put up. Here's the second stage. Once they understand the table and we start moving up in equipment, then the dog needs to learn the same theory. The dog needs to be active in the barking for me to move. Every time he barks, I come alive. Then I teach them the right energy gets you the bite. He's focused on me, he's looking at me, and then same thing. They need to regrip and bite deeper in order for them to get me to back away from the wedge. I'm just trying to bring my hand over his face, trying to bring the leash over, trying to see if there's anything that bothers the dog and anything that I identify that we should be working on. So far, the dog is handling everything great. And this dog is an adult now. He's like 2.5 years old, and he actually had a live bite. Somebody broke into their house and he had to do his job, and he did very well. He actually defended the family and was able to get the person out of the house by biting them. You see, his bite is deteriorating. He's going towards the back of his mouth. It's not such a full bite. So I hold it and I wait for him to fix it. And once he gets the grip that I want, he gets it back. Or if he lets go, now he doesn't get it again. You see, and I keep teasing the dog and make sure that he's upset about it, and then he gets put up. Here's another dog in the progression of the training. This is when the same theory, the dog has to bark to get us to come closer to them or to get them to come alive. And by barking and acting, being proactive, that gets them the bite. That gets us to the decoy to come closer to them. Now, having a full bite is what gets them to keep the pillow. Barking gets me to come closer. Regripping and crushing down on their bite gets them to keep the wedge. Same deal, we start exposing the dog to different things that might make them nervous, like me bringing my hand over their face. And we're just slowly trying to show them different things that they might not like and see how they handle them, and also teaching them how to handle them. So you see, every time they regrip and bite harder, I back away and I mark the behavior. See, I'm checking that she's holding onto it. She has a nice solid bite. She's holding onto it, but I want to promote that regrip. So I put a little back pressure, and the second she regrips, I back away from her. She's standing there like that all throughout. And as you can see, the common thread, doesn't matter what equipment we're using, it's all the same theory. The dog has to bark and bring us alive to make sure that we get closer to them, and then they have to hold on to it and regrip in order to keep it. The pillow that I was using, that one there, is this one you can see in the image here. It's what we call the slippery wedge. That leather that's on it is very slippery, and the dogs can hold on to it. Our business partner, Michael Nesbeth, he is gonna have these covers for sale. So if you guys check out his website, it's gonna be in Grassroots Canine. He will be having them available, a very high quality leather. And the purpose of that leather is that the dogs can't sink their teeth into it. So that way, they can only use pressure to hold on to it. Their teeth doesn't get stuck in the fabric. When we're using jute or some of the French linen, what happens is that their canines and their teeth get stuck on the fabric, and then we can't take it from them. That's why it's very important that you got to make sure that you have the proper equipment where you're gonna do this. If you're trying to take the equipment from the dog, make sure that you're using the equipment that has this leather where they can't get their tooth stuck in. because obviously we don't want to rip their teeth out by pulling on the wrong equipment. All right, and once we get the dog trained in the different areas with the different equipment, then move on to the suit. For me personally, I don't do that much work on a sleeve. I like to go from that leather wedge that you guys saw straight into the suit. That's personal preference, and that's what I seen to work for me. I see no purpose for the sleeve. Once the dog starts biting me, I want it to be on the suit. And also it keeps me safer, and it allows the dog to be a little bit more free. For example, if I put pressure on the dog, and I don't allow them to bite me in the arm, and they happen to get a cheap shot at my leg, I'm okay with that. I want to encourage them to be proactive and try to bite something. By having the suit, you're able to do those last minute decisions to allow the dog to bite you somewhere that you were not planning on. So that's why we always move straight to that. This is a video of my personal dog. This was his first time on the suit. And it's also the first time that he's working with this new decoy. So I'm trying to talk the decoy through it, and also gave him his first bite. So obviously being tied to a table is something that he already understands from when he was a puppy. So just the fact that I back tie him to that table, he knows that he was going to bite something. So the way that he was able to bridge that gap was by just the equipment. Yes. The second we put him on the table, he knew I'm about to bite something. Whatever this person brings, I'll bite. Yes. And then if you notice, the decoy is presenting only the area that we want the dog to bite. And the way that we do that is we make sure that the area we want the dog to bite is the closest to the dog's mouth. So I'm going to rewind it here for a second. If you guys see, right before the dog gets the impact, the decoys make sure that that's the closest part of their body to the dog. So when the dog goes grabs it, it naturally chooses to get that because it's the easiest target. And the decoy, if you notice, is putting back tension against the chain. So when the dog regrips, the decoy sets the bite by pulling against it. At the same time, I am marking the behavior with a yes and touching the dog. Like I said, this is my personal dog, so he understands to regrip and he understands what my cues are. Can you bring that arm around? So whenever he regrips and does the desired behavior, then I mark it and the decoy also marks it. See, and all I'm trying to do is just touch the dog and create a positive association. This specific dog, it's okay with that. Him and I have worked together enough where me being next to him is not a problem. So that's something that we're using. But if the dog that you're working with does not like the handler being that close, then you can remove the handler from the picture and let it all be between the dog and the decoy. In this occasion, of course, I wanted to be able to coach the decoy a little bit and also work on my dog. So that's why I'm up there with them. If you notice, the dog started getting a little chewy on the bite. I'm going to back it up a bit. You see he's moving his mouth. So that's where I added the back pressure with the leash to keep the dog from doing that. That's where the Skinner box comes in. So we're using the back pressure on the table to isolate the chewing behavior. If the dog starts getting chewy, then we pull back and don't allow it. And then once he does a full solid regrips, then we mark it. You see the decoy comes forward and gives the dog the opportunity to regrip. And the second they do, then they back up. See, they come forward, they regrip, and then the decoy marks it and I mark it. And if you can see, the dog slowly starts getting the entire picture of biting deeper, gets in the marks that he wants. But of course, this is his first time. If he starts getting chewy, then I get my hands in there and apply the back pressure to isolate the behavior. And as the dog gets better, of course, I remove myself from it. I don't praise them as much, just getting them to create pain on the decoy and to get the decoy to draw. Those are the cues that he needs. So as they get older and they get better, then I remove myself from the equation more and more. See, we're looking for that bite and that calm, crushing bite. course, I get very excited. He's my personal dog, and he's like, we're getting exactly what I want from him. And then the first bite, I always do a hard out, just so the dog understands, like, oh man, I lost it. And then I also let them chase the decoy out. You see, we get him off the table, and I let him chase the decoy all the way out. And I allow them to chase the decoy all the way out, just so they get that really, really amped memory right before they get put up. Okay, so this is the same dog that we saw earlier. Now she has moved up from the pillow. We're gonna put her on the suit for the very first time. Once again, the being on the table is what's giving her the cue of what's about to happen. A lot of dogs, they see the equipment, that this guy doesn't have a bite pillow, or they don't have a sleeve. So the dog starts looking for any type of cue that can tell them what's about to happen. In this instance, the table is doing that for me. The table is letting the dog know, oh, I'm about to bite something this guy has. And now I'm just gonna present the bite suit instead of any equipment. You see that dog is licking her lips. That's a classical conditional response. She knows she's about to bite something, so her lips are getting ready. And now that I see she's really interested on it, then I let her grab it. And once again, it's just once the dog regrips, I back up and I mark it. And I use the back pressure to isolate the behaviors. So I pull against the chain, and when I want her to regrip, I just take a little bit of the slack on the chain. And then I have the handler leash her so we can work on leash pressure. What we're gonna do is we're slowly gonna transition her from the table into the ground. You see, we're just marking the dog. Every time she regrips, I mark it verbally, and I also move. So you see, when I want her to regrip, I completely stop moving to make sure that the behavior that gets rewarded is exactly the one I want. So I stop moving completely. Once the dog regrips, then I come back alive. And sometimes I want her to regrip once, sometimes I want her to regrip multiple times. And as the dog does better, then I can start trying new things, see if something bothers them or not. And like always, every regrip makes the pressure go away. So if I grab her skin, if I grab her legs, all of it goes away when she bites deeper. She bites harder, all the negative things go away. Yes, you can see as the dog progresses, then so does the pressure. We start adding more and more. When she has shown me that she has the necessary tools to overcome these obstacles, then we start adding more and more pressure. You see, like I start screaming, looking away from the dog, and if she regrips, then I mark it and reward the behavior. See, I'm holding her leg. She obviously doesn't like that. She's thinking. When she tries something new, then I make sure that she gets rewarded for doing what I want, which is always to bite deeper. I put her on a surface she doesn't like. She's not so sure about it, so she starts pulling, and I make sure that I mark the behavior. Oh, good girl. Always making sure that the dog understands the marker, right? We want to make sure that she's the one that decides what works and what doesn't. Now, this is the same dog. As she progresses in the training, now we're trying to teach her cues. So now here we're teaching her when is the proper time to regrip. And she's using the back pressure from the handler to learn when to regrip. So you see, she has a solid bite, and every time the handler approaches and gets close to her, then we teach her to regrip. So you will see now just releasing the pressure of the leash gets the dog to regrip. And we're gonna teach her that every time the handler gets close to her, she needs to regrip. You see, the handler comes in and approaches the dog, or releases the pressure, and the dog regrips. Yeah, I put my hand in her stomach, and all I'm expecting her to do is to regrip to make that to go away. Just stay in the same area, biting harder and deeper. See, if I put my hand there and you don't like it, just bite harder and it goes away. If she starts pushing, if she starts pulling on me, which I don't want, I stand still. In that instance, I grabbed her leg and she understood right away, okay, that's not working. I gotta try something new. Okay, I'm just sitting there and she needs to learn. You need to bite me to come alive again. It's all about the dog being active and the decoy being reactive to the dog. So I just react to whatever the dog is doing. See? The decoy comes in. So the handler comes in, and whenever she goes to mess with something, the dog regrips and the handler backs away. So we're teaching her when the handler approaches, you bite harder. So you'll see the handler comes in, the dog regrips, and we back away and reward the dog for it. We want to create that cue that the handler comes in and you bite harder. See, the handler comes in, she bites, and we get away. That's all. We're just classically conditioning that the handler approaching means bite harder. You see, we create the gap, bring the dog to the handler. The dog regrips, huge regrip there. She even hopped in her back legs. She's really trying to push forward. And she's also understanding, if I do this, I get more room to work. My handler will get away from me and let me work more individually. You see, the second the handler comes in, the dog starts regripping. That is very helpful when we have law enforcement officers and the officer has to come in to handcuff the subject or something. We want the dog to think when my handler is coming in, I have to bite harder, instead of thinking if my handler comes in, I'm gonna get outed. So we don't want them to think every time my handler comes in, they're gonna ask me to out. We want them to think every time my handler comes in, I have to regrip and bite harder. That way we start creating positive associations to you instead of something negative like letting go. You see, now we're pairing a word with it. We know that every time the handler approaches, the dog is going to regrip. So that way now we pair the word with that action. And then we wait for the behavior to happen. When the behavior happens, then we reward it. You see, she hasn't regripped yet, so we're waiting for the regrip to happen, and we're not gonna change doing anything. Everything's gonna stay the same until the dog regrips. Okay, so we come in, the handler approaches, and the dog regrips. Once that happens, then we mark it and we reward it. Yes. See, and now after we get the desired behavior, the handler has approached multiple times. Now 1 out of 10 regrips, then the dog gets to be outed and taken off from the bite. See, it's all very calm and very controlled, and the dog is always in control of all the stimulus and everything that's happening to them. This is another good example. This dog is a retired sheriff dog. This dog hasn't worked in a long time, so we were trying to do some just some fun training with him, letting him get some bites in and blow some steam off. And this is Mike Lilly's dog. He's also a very talented trainer, and he's gonna be doing some work with the association as well. So this is Mike Lilly's dog, Neko, from when he was deployed in the sheriff department in South Florida. I also was one of the importers of the dog. So the dog got imported from overseas, and I was part of the company who brought the dog over. And we sold the dog to Mike Lilly when he was a young pup. Mike Lilly, they did all the training for the dog. They did a phenomenal training on him. And then he also deployed with the dog. So he spent a couple of years on the street with him. They got multiple very successful bites, and the dog is genetically gifted. So in this video, you're gonna be able to see how we're able to pair the regripping with the handler being able to control the dog by the harness. He's gonna get tired quick. He barely fit his arm. So after the dog had been retired for a while, we're trying to put some repetitions on the dog bites. So if you notice, every time the dog regrip, you see the dog is literally walking into me. He's pushing with his back legs. He's very empowered, and he's in control of what's happening. See, he has those violent regrips that create a lot of pressure. And now we're gonna start pairing his dad pulling on the leash and his dad approaching with the dog regripping. And if you can see, it works perfect where the dog understands exactly what he's supposed to do. It's like a machine. His back pressure, release, and regrip. Every time he does it, the dog regulates. Perfect communication between the handler and the dog knows exactly what is expected of him. All his job is to keep biting harder every single time. See, and in the same session, I can scream and act like I'm in pain, and at the same time, I can say yes and mark the dog for the right behavior. You see, everything he does, every time he bites harder, it makes my hand fly away. So if I get to put my hand underneath his stomach, he bites and I pull my hand away. So the dog is very proactive in taking control of the situation. Right? Once we have the dog introduced into the suit, then we can start moving into more advanced work. And this advanced work includes multiple things. So keep in mind what is the end goal for your dog. So for example, what are you gonna do? Is your dog gonna be sports? Is your dog gonna do personal protection? Is it gonna be a police dog? Whatever it is that you're gonna be the end goal for your dog, then once you start doing the advanced work, it has to be all directed towards that. You know, all the work needs to be directed towards what your end goal is. This dog here, he's a young dog that he just learned how to handle all the pressure in the suit. So we start doing multiple different scenarios and putting more pressure to him to teach him that the answer is always the same. Just bite harder and everything will get better. Just a heads up, then this video has pretty loud music. So if you have your sound turned up, just turn it down a little bit to make sure that it doesn't become too loud. All right, so I'm about to start playing the video right now. Watch out for the audio. You see, anything I do to the dog, if I can grab him by the tail, by biting deeper, everything gets better for him. You see, he's actively regripping, pushing. And every time he does something positive, I mark it. You see, me falling to the ground is a positive marker for the dog. The dog understands when I drop to the ground, I need to do whatever made that happen, I need to do it again. See, the dog is constantly pushing and pushing. And everything I do to him, he knows I just have to bite a little bit harder, and this guy is gonna let go of me. You see, he's trying to obviously get away from my body. He's a very smart dog. He doesn't want to be in that negative space, so he tries to bite harder to get out of it. Same with this dog. This dog is a very, very smart dog, knows how to fight extremely well. So you will see how he puts all the behaviors that he's being taught, he puts them together. No matter what I do, he bites very hard and he's always crunching. Whether he's picked up, it doesn't matter. He just keeps crunching and biting harder. He knows the only way to get down is by crushing my arm. The harder he bites, the more closer he is to achieving his goal. You see, same dog. And this in this instance, and I'm gonna make a side note about this video. A lot of people see when the dog is trying to get his legs away from me because he doesn't want me to grab his legs. A lot of people might see them as avoidance, on like the dog is not comfortable with me touching his legs. It's not really avoidance. It's the dog is no dummy. He's a very smart dog, right? If I'm gonna go grab his legs, he's gonna do everything in his power to protect himself and don't allow me to grab his legs. That is no different from me. I like jiu-jitsu. I like to practice Brazilian jiu-jitsu. If somebody tries to grab me by the neck, I'm obviously going to try to avoid that as much as possible. The difference is that because of my training, if somebody does grab me by the neck, then I know what to do about it, and I'm gonna put that into motion. But preventing that person by grabbing me by the neck is the very first step, right? So it's the same with our dogs. If our dog is trying to be proactive to prevent you from causing them any type of harm, like trying to get their legs away from you, trying to move away from you so you don't grab them in a specific way, that is not necessarily avoidance. That is the dog being smart at protecting themselves. This dog here, you will see, he's very, very smart dog. So he knows how to protect himself. And he's very proactive at keeping pressure and biting harder to keep you from doing something. So pay attention to the video, how the dog tries to protect himself. But once he sees that he's unable to protect himself and that he is in the situation I'm trying to put him in, he just fights through it and bites harder in order to get out of it. You guys want to see something cool? The dog that's learned. And you see how he keeps trying. Upside down. So you see, he keeps trying to find away from me. He's trying to move away. And people are thinking that he's avoidance, but it's not real avoidance. He's just trying to not put himself in a negative situation. But once he finds himself in the situation, he keeps biting and fighting the same. You see, he has no problem with being upside down. He knows what to do about it. He would just much rather not get to that point, obviously. You see, he's regripping, biting like crazy. And he knows if I don't allow this guy, he won't put me upside down. So he's obviously trying to prevent it. You see, like right there, he doesn't want me to do it. Very smart. But once I have him on that spot, then fighting is the only way out, and he's totally okay with that. I can roll him. See, and you can roll the dog. He understands everything's fine. All I have to do is just keep biting harder and harder. Obviously, this is a very experienced dog. So a lot of training went into this dog being able to do all of this. A lot of training by a lot of trainers. I wasn't the only decoy who helped this dog. He's been through multiple different skill decoys that taught him. So you see how proactive he is at defending himself. And everything ends with a big, solid regrip, which is what we're looking for. So he's always regripping and shaking. That's the behavior I want. That is a solid, solid grip. Actually, this dog broke my forearm bone in a bite. He was biting me in the outside of the forearm, and he beat so hard to the suit that he actually cracked my bone. So, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that solid crushing pain. I want the dog to be constantly pushing forward and not do anything else. Same dog, just I love working with him just because he's so solid at demonstrating the proper behaviors. So just a different example of how they can handle pressure. See, I'm trying to grab his legs. He's very proactive and not letting me touch his legs. He knows the best way to keep me from grabbing his legs is to regrip and bite harder. You see, he tries to avoid it. He tries to move out of the way. But when that fails, he goes right to regripping and biting harder. See, I pin him against that piece of wood. So okay, if I don't have a way out, I'll just bite you harder. And also, when I stop moving, he knows the only way to get me to come alive is by biting harder. Me stopping like that doesn't mean he's going to get outed. It just means you have to bite harder to bring me alive again. Once again, this is the same dog. This time we're working in water. We just slowly keep increasing the pressure and the outside stimulus that he can handle. And he's always trying to make sure that we cement on the dog's brain is always the same answer. Just bite harder, regrip, crush in your bite, and that will get you out of trouble, no matter what the trouble is. So as you can see, I can grab him and literally dunk him into the water. And his bite is actually getting harder because he's using the regrip to hold on. And you see he's biting on very, very hard. And I'll teach him whenever you regrip and you crush, then you get to come out of the pool. The dog is very empowered by it. He's very bold in everything he does. No matter what the pressure is, I can grab him by the tail. It doesn't matter. I just have to keep biting harder and regripping, and he will go away. You see how very little pulling this dog does? He knows that the best way to achieve his goal is by pushing, crushing bites. So you see it there. He's just constantly crushing and pushing. When the handler of the dog's owner, comes over, in no way is the dog affected by her presence. The dog actually gets more bold when she's there. He knows that mom approaching you means good things. It's all positive things that are gonna achieve your ultimate goal. You see? So we see the handler's there with him. He's just regripping and biting harder every time. It's all positive for him. That's something very important. You should always have that positive association with your dog. So your dog understands my handler approaching me equals good things. Sometimes because of the incorrect training, the dog sees the handler approaching them as the end of the fun, right? Like, see, my handler is coming, I'm probably gonna get outed, I'm gonna be completely done with the fun, and we want to change that. We want to have the dogs think when my handler approaches, everything gets better. Everything is a lot better. And one of the other advanced techniques that we like to use, or that we like to teach the dogs, is that no matter what's happening, all the distractions has to be ignored. Everything that's happening around you is ignored. The only thing you should be worried about is biting and the fight that you're in. That's why we use a lot of different stimulus to make sure that the dog understands only biting harder is what gets you what you want. Here, we try to bait the dog. We use different equipment, a sleeve and a pillow, to try to get the dog to take that equipment. But obviously, the dog has been taught properly, so he knows that he needs to ignore all the equipment. He needs to get me. So that's why we do this type of drills, where we're basically, we call them shedding drills, where we put on more equipment, and then as the dog bites it, we take that equipment off, and he needs to let go and redirect and come after the decoy. Sorry about that. We let the dog take the bite. Then as he bites it, I'll let go of the equipment. And he needs to only focus on the decoy. If the dog happens to let go and grab the equipment, I like to tease them, like grabbing them by the tail or doing something, so they start refocusing on me and give me their attention. This dog, obviously, he's done it enough, so he knows if he lets go or tries to bite me, bad things happen. So that's why he's always focused on keeping his teeth on me and nothing else. This is another dog that, this is actually a law enforcement dog. This dog been on the street for a while and has multiple bites. And as you can see, when the dog is on the bite, we try to tease him with multiple toys. This video is also pretty loud with music. So if you guys want to turn down your volume, this one is going to have some music. So also be careful with the audio. You see, we're using toys. We're using bites to throw on the dog. The handler and the other trainer, they're also throwing toys, tugs, the balls, everything. So if you can see, the dog is obviously focused on just re-gripping and biting me harder. He doesn't care about the suit or anything that's around him. He's only focused on the person, and that's what we're looking for. All the other equipment is completely useless unless there's somebody attached to it. So that's why we try to teach the dogs to only focus on the suit. Doesn't matter what I'm doing. I'm playing with the toys, with a tug. It doesn't matter what, the dog needs to stay with me. So that's something very important. Make sure that whenever you guys are working, you teach the dogs the proper behavior. Now moving out to the out part during bite work. Something that I always like to say, it's called bite work, not out work. A lot of people like to focus on the out, and that's a problem. Whenever we're teaching the dogs bite work, we need is to teach them to bite. The out is an obedience command. Bite work and out are not related. Out is an obedience exercise. It's obedience to what you're being told to do. So I like to teach the dogs the out in a completely different context. I don't like to do it during the bite. So we do it for a toy, for something very simple, and we're trading for food and different things with things that have the lower value, right? We can ask the dog once they're on the bite suit, their favorite thing in the world, and now we ask them to let go of it. So that's why I like to start with something that has a little bit less value to the dog, so they're more willing to let go. And all of it is done outside of the bite work environment. Teaching the out is one of the things that causes the most handler conflict. So basically, your dog is going to be more worried about you outing them than they're going to be worried about the bite, right? So we want to make sure that the dog doesn't see you as the person that goes in and outs them. So that's why we need to be careful when we're teaching the out. Once we use, if we can understand operant conditioning, we can communicate to the dog what's expected of them. So basically we can make them understand that if you let go, you're gonna get it back quickly. So the fastest way to get it back is actually by letting go. And if we can use the proper quadrants in operant conditioning with the right timing and marking the right behaviors, the dog can understand that you're not going to take them off and they're gonna lose their fun. They're gonna be able to get it right back. And like I said, we gotta teach the out in a completely different context. And a very important part is this last one, is satisfying the dog's needs and drives before asking them for an out. We know that a lot of people, they put the dog in the bite for 3 to 5 minutes and then they try to take the dog off the bite. The dog has been looking forward to doing bite work for a long time. They love doing bite work. That's why they got chosen. And now after they've been working so hard, now we're gonna ask them to give up what they love the most in the world. So that's something to keep in mind, that let the dog satisfy the drives, work the dog for 10, 15 minutes if possible. Obviously keep in mind how tired the dog is. If they're overheating, for example, I live in Florida, and down here we have 98, 100 degrees Fahrenheit constantly. So it's something that we have to be careful when we're working with the dogs. But as much as possible, we try to work the dogs very long before we ask them to let go. That way, all the drives are satisfied and also they're tired. So when the dog is very tired, they're way more likely to let go. Then we move on to scenario-based training. We have to obviously start showing a realistic picture during training of what the dog is going to be doing. Like I said, we gotta focus on what is the end goal with the specific dog, but try to present the scenarios of how they're gonna be deploying in real life. For example, this dog that we're working for here is a law enforcement dog. So now we're trying to show the picture of biting with different equipment. This is a prosthetic arm that we use. It's some sort of rubber that simulates the arm of a person. And the only reason we do it is just to present the picture. Of course, when the dog gets on it and they bite it, it's cold, it's rubber. They know it's not an arm. So you're not really fooling anyone into thinking that it's a real arm. The second the dogs gets on it, they will know. But the picture, the visual picture that they get from it is very impactful and something that they get to see. So they just see a single arm there and then get to grab it. So as you can see, it's very important to make sure the dog bites on the right spot to make sure that the decoy doesn't get hurt, because there's very little room for error. So that's why you see I'm looking very focused on where the dog is gonna bite, and I make sure that he bites in the chunky part of the arm. And then we're just trying to make sure that the dog sees that picture and he will take it. And this is another scenario where we're training for law enforcement. So you see, we're trying to show the proper stacking behind with cover and the handler giving commands. So you can see the dog already understands that. This is a completely passive decoy that comes alive when he's bit. See, we are practicing with covering officers. We're trying to present bite pressure. We're trying to bring the dog back into this covered, the safety of the covered room. So you're using the long line to pull the person back towards they want to be. See, they're using the leash to apply back pressure, and we have a resisting person. They're trying to bring the decoy into the safety of the room. And these are all things that they use in their tactics here for the dogs to deploy. And we're just trying to present that picture to the dog so he sees what the work is gonna be like. We also like to present multiple different decoys. It's not all men. I like very big fan of teaching dogs to bite women, different people of different color, different height, different type of body builds and everything, because we don't want the dogs to just get used to one specific type of person. We want the dogs to get used to biting pretty much anyone we tell them to, including a female if necessary. So this is another scenario here. We're presenting for law enforcement, just biting, the dog is biting in a different surface, in a different height, just in a bed, that is something different. And they're working with a different type of person. So obviously we want the dog to work in any type of environment, getting used to the handler being involved in everything they're doing, and just trying to show them some more scenario-based training. Yeah, we have the dog ready to go again. That's why we showed them the entire picture of control. That way, we're also practicing with the handler having full control of their canines once they're removed from the bite. We're just trying to present the picture as much as possible, like they're gonna be deploying. In this scenario, we're trying to expose the dogs to the nose of the taser. So if you pay attention to the handler, to the decoy, you will see that he's working the dog. And once he's working the dogs, one of the backup officers comes around and they deploy a taser. They're obviously not actually shooting the decoy with it, but they're just firing it off so the dog can hear the electricity noise. So he starts like a normal bite. The decoy is just working the dog, putting some pressure on the dog, screaming and hitting the dog. Then after the dog is comfortable on the bite and he's doing good and has control of the decoy, then the handlers come up back and you can see the taser and hear it. They're just trying to expose the dog to more realistic things that they will be seeing during their work. This next video is once the dog is more working on specific things. For example, in this one, we were doing some tracking and soon removing from uncomfortable spots in the middle of the night. So basically me and my training partner, we told each other where we're gonna go start, and then we have to use the dogs to find each other. So it's all in the middle of the night. I think it's like 3 a.m. and we just found a different spot where we could go train.
It's the Sheriff's Office K9 unit. You're under arrest. If you're in there, you need to come out. You're going to get dog bit. It's your last warning. Sheriff's Office K9 unit. You're in there, you need to come out. You're going to get dog bit.
Sorry about the music, so be careful with the volume. There's some music that is about to start now. You see, I'm wearing very little clothes. I only have a hidden sleeve. And basically, we're just trying to present the picture to the dog of the decoy having less and less equipment, and also using the leash to pull the person out. In this one is one of my dogs, and he's just biting a completely passive person after a track. So basically, the dog found the person and they just went straight to them. Once again, we're just trying to use very little equipment. So we're just trying to move on to a hidden sleeve at this point, and we're just trying to get repetitions. So in this specific instance, he's wearing normal pants, hidden sleeve, and just a hoodie over that. Just trying to get that picture of just biting a completely passive person. And once again, the bite and the regrip is what makes the person come alive. Once the dog is removed, they get pulled backwards, ready to go again. And I like to be involved with my dogs because at one point or another during the fight, you're gonna have to get in there. So that's why I keep touching my dog and get them used to me being in the fight. And at the end, this is a dog that has been through a lot of training to begin with. He has a lot of positive things going for him. He knows how to handle pressure. He has a lot of experience, has a lot of street bites. But in addition, the dog has very, very good genetics. He was bred very well, so he can handle a lot of pressure. Whenever you see videos like this, always keep that in mind. This dog is handling a lot of pressure from me and doing a lot of things for him, but this dog is close to 3.5 years old. He has seen a lot of training and has seen a lot of real life bites. So whenever you're gonna add pressure for a dog, make sure that you understand that he can handle the pressure first. Here, the dog obviously knew how to handle it, so I just let you guys watch and enjoy the video. You see, I'm trying to put the dog inside the trash can. I'm not hitting the dog. I'm just hitting the trash can, but he's inside of it and he can hear the noise. You see, he goes inside that trash can and I'm just hitting the trash can, not the dog. And once the dog bites me really hard on my knee, I obviously drop to the ground to mark the behavior and to teach him that biting hard, that's what I want him to do. You see, we're adding a lot of negative words, things that the dog you will think will bother him, but it obviously doesn't. I'm picking him up by the skin, putting a lot of pressure on him. And every time he does something good, I stop and try to drop if I can. You see, the dog understands. No matter what the decoy says, you should never listen to him. Actually, you should bite harder. So there, I was screaming his release command. I was telling him los, and instead he told me no and just bit me harder, which is exactly what we're looking for. Now we're adding the handler to the video. We're adding the handler to the picture to make sure that the dog fights just as good with the handler. And we're also trying to teach the dog that when dad gets here, everything gets better. Everything is easier when your handler approaches. So you see, there's pets, all the good things start. You see? And then I ask the handler to pretend like he's gonna out the dog. And when the dog regrips and bites me harder, the handler backs away and I mark it. You see? So every time the dog bites me really hard, I'm screaming. And also he's biting me in my knee. I'm in actual pain. I'm not pretending. I'm not faking it. So that's why I'm vocalizing and screaming and cursing, because I'm in actual pain. He's biting me extremely hard. You see, I'm taking his air. So I'm trying to choke him off. I'm trying to take his air. And when he bites and regrips like that, I let go. So you can see the intensity on his bite. And I'm even hitting the dog in the face. And when he regrips, everything stops and gets better. And I'm telling him, once he does something that good, we bring the handler in and we make everything better for the dog. You see, the dog is regripping and the handler comes and makes everything better and marks it. And that's why we're petting the dog. He just took a lot of pressure. I was hitting him on the face and he chose to bite me harder. So that's why I'm marking it and I'm rewarding it. See, we're trying to make the handler as visible as possible. We want the handler to be right in the dog's face because I want him to be part of all that fight and understand that makes everything better. Once again, like I said, that's a very experienced dog. So it takes a lot of training and a lot of time to get the dog to that point. There's no point in rushing a dog or taking a dog to do all these things because you might create a problem instead of fixing something. So keep that always in mind. Work the dog that's in front of you and make sure that they understand how to turn the pressure off before you add any pressure to the dog. Well, that's the end of the presentation. I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. I know that it's a lot of information for such a short amount of time, but obviously there's only so much we can do with the time that we're allotted. For that reason, we offer, or I personally offer, a lot of one-on-one coaching online. So if you guys would like some private lessons, we can do some Zoom meetings over the internet and I can help with any kind of training. And also we travel and we do seminars with Triple Threat Company, a Triple Threat Canine. That's our seminar company where Michael Nesbeth, Jeremy Nix, and myself, we travel the world doing seminars and teaching people for law enforcement and civilians alike. So if you guys want to know how to contact us or how to get a hold of us, please look us up on Facebook, facebook.com/triple-threat-canine. And also my personal page is CRK9 Dog Training or Carlos Ramirez Canine. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and all platforms of social media under Carlos Ramirez Canine or CRK9. So please go check out and follow and subscribe to both of our pages at Triple Threat Canine and Carlos Ramirez Canine. And that way you guys can stay up to date in any upcoming events or any type of training that we have coming. Like I said, if you guys want any private training, you can also reach out to me personally and we can book up some online sessions. But anyway, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I really appreciate you guys at the Working Dog Association for giving me this opportunity.